Hello, and welcome to another edition of Curtis Jones Writing. I, if you're new to my channel, I am reading all of my books one chapter at a time until I get through with them. I've got about 14 books, so uh, I'm on my fifth book, which is Love Endures All Things Across the Creek. Uh, you can back up and watch some of the other videos. Go all the way back to the beginning if you want to. You can tell I'm a new uh, to YouTube videos at that time. I presented a short introduction video and didn't know how to shut it off and just kept running it for 10 minutes past. Anyway, that was an embarrassment, but I thought, oh well, I don't know how to edit it, so I'll just leave it. I may not be very good at editing even yet today. So, the last chapter I read out of Love Endures All Things is called A Barn Raising, and I told about how we got to the point of being ready to do a barn raising. And this is Starting Construction, the title of chapter 4. I hope you enjoy it. Let me sit down so I can have some light to read. The construction on the house was begun with the building of piers that would support the floor of the house. They were laid out and set up into place with a great deal of enthusiasm. Stephanie and myself designed the house. It had 12 rooms and was to be constructed in thirds. The house was built in 3 sections, and we started with the porch, laundry room, kitchen, and dining room. There we go. Yep. And which constituted the first 1/3 of the house on the west side. After the floor was built, we raised the framework for the walls and set them aside until we could build the roof jacks on the floor and have them ready to put on top of the walls. When we got to the time to set the walls, we stood up all the walls in one day. Our oldest son Mike came and helped on a Saturday, and we had the first 3 rooms and the porch divided, and we put the plywood on the walls to make sure that they didn't fall in the night. Stephanie and I moved a bed into the kitchen and placed it on the floor. It gave us some privacy, and we needed that room from time to time. It was early fall, and the nights always brought a heavy dew. So we took a large clear plastic sheet that we usually used for vapor barrier on the outside of the house and uh, strapped it onto the walls in the kitchen. There was no roof as yet. This was done to keep the dew off of us in the night. After a few weeks in the camper, this felt like true freedom. We were very tired and slept quite well until we were awakened from a sound sleep by the crack of thunder. If you have never been jarred awake by the sound that lightning makes when it strikes very near you and without the dampening effect that is furnished, that a furnished house affords, then you've never been awakened this way. We both woke at the same time with the same look of terror on our faces. It had evidently been raining for some time, as the plastic sheet was down almost around our heads. I'd say it was within 6 inches of touching our heads. We were able to see it because of the lightning that filled the black night and lit it up. It was a storm that you would love to watch from within the safety of your own home. When we were, when we went to sleep that night, we looked up to all the stars and talked about how many you could see with the city without the city lights, them being far away. In the storm, you couldn't see a single star. The night was alight with the effects of lightning. The peace and quiet was disturbed by the crash and roar of thunder. Will Rogers said that if you don't like the weather in Oklahoma, wait around for half an hour and it'll be different. The key thought is different, not necessarily better. We learned that firsthand this night. I grabbed a flashlight I had taken to bed with us, and I turned it on as we asked each other, what should we do now? It was raining so hard and we expected the sheet to break wide open and split so that the 15 or 20 gallons of water might fill the bed and soak us in the process. Just then, the strapping that held the sheet gave way, and the large pool of water that hung over our heads came crashing down and flooded. It was a flood of water, and it filled the floor and ran out the door and eventually off the floor and away. The sheet had not split, and we were still dry. We were now under a large plastic sheet that kept us dry, and so we simply returned to sleep and finished out the night right there. The morning broke with a clear blue sky that hid the terror of the night before. We decided that this event would make a good story to tell the grandkids when we had some. But as I remember, we never told what had happened that night to any of the grandkids. Stephanie would do all the preparation work while I was at my paying job, and when I got home at 4 in the afternoon, I would do the work I knew how to do, things such as wiring and plumbing. And the next day, Stephanie would place the sheetrock in the lower tier of the walls, and in this way, we closed the house in before winter came. We had installed a portable chimney so we could put a wood stove in to heat what we had of the house. The back was sealed with a great plastic sheet. It was the end of October and it was getting very cold at night. We had 3 rooms completed by this time. We had sent Dad's camper back home and were living in the house. Brian had also moved into the house with us because of the cold. We were resigned to having to winter in this crowded little house. Just about then is when a man that owned the house down the road gave us a visit. He was a neighbor. He was the neighbor that owned the house that was about a mile away, and and on our side of the creek, and he offered it to us for the winter because we had children. The youngest was in the 3rd grade. We accepted it without reservation. We were glad to have it because we had not had the electric turned on at our house as yet. The next day we hurried to get the roof jacks of our house into place and the decking on them and the temporary roofing over it. We were only able to do this because of all our children's help with most everything that was done that day. We wanted to finish the house first. We thought the rural electrification program was still in effect at that time. The federal government would pay to install electric in rural parts of America by an act of Congress. So I wasn't in a hurry to put the electric in until I was ready. That turned out to be a big mistake. We had talked to the neighbors for several hours. That is when they said they had to go to California for a year. They said if we would watch their place, we could live there for free. The only stipulation was that we pay the electric bill when it came in. All other mail was to be sent to the California address he gave us. We considered this a godsend. It only took half a day to move into their house. We spent several days repairing the road over the back way. We had first we had become friends with the man who drove the county road grader, which lived only a couple of miles from us. I talked to him, and he suggested I talk to the county commissioner, and if he said okay, he would be glad to grade the road over the hill. Uh, he would be glad to grade the road over the hill. Within a week, we had the holes filled in with all kinds of rocks and gravel, and when the grader went over it, it became a fair road. We still had the deep mud holes, but all of the washouts were gone. Stephanie and I had set out to repair the deep holes as well. We spent much time on the road work at our expense. Things were going well, and as is the usual case, a monkey wrench hit the works. I fell at work and blew out my knee again. It was the worst time for something like this to have happened. Stephanie had to get a job so that we could eat. The kids went on the school lunch program, and we became very poor very quickly. Not that we were anything less before, but this became worse. The company that I worked for called the injury a pre existing condition. The workers' compensation insurance quit paying benefits. I had already scheduled the total knee replacement, and the surgery was done. I had a conversation with the doctor about this before. The doctor is the one who refused to qualify me for workers' compensation. I agreed that the condition had existed, but the injury I received at work aggravated the condition, and that was the reason for the needed surgery. Every time I had an appointment with him, I restated this argument. He always put 10 to 15 patients in a ward, and we sat on the edges of tables as he walked along and looked at each file. He usually said, "Everything looks good. See you in 2 weeks." I was angry, and I was the second he would see in this row of patients that day. I let him have it and wished that I had said more, but I didn't. Stephanie's insurance had just given him a check for $25,000 for the operation he had done on me. I wanted to see if he even knew my name. When he came to me, the nurse handed him my file and he asked, "How you doing?" I said to him, "You don't even know who I am, do you? And you don't even spend 5 minutes with me. You won't even spend 5 minutes with me. You line me up with 15 other cattle and run us through like we were rats in a maze." He stopped and looked at me then. I continued to speak and I said, "I'll bet you don't even know my name after you were paid $25,000 for a couple of hours' work. I'll bet you don't even know the names of any one of us in this room. So what is my name?" He opened the file and turned to the front page and I said, "I knew you wouldn't have You would have to look it up. You don't have time for any of us, do you? Everyone in the room in that examining room asked what their name was too. He was called to the carpet that day, and I'm glad. I think all doctors ought to have to at least show some kind of bedside manner. It took almost a year to recover from that operation, and the doctor that didn't know my name got his comeuppance that day. Stephanie worked without complaint for that whole year as I recovered. I was glad of a house furnished to live in comfortably while this was going on. The spring came late that year. With the spring came the FBI. They were looking for the owner of the house we were allowed to live in that winter. It seemed that he had a large greenhouse set up in the front yard that he had grown marijuana in and had hauled it to California to sell. The feds were also going to take everything he had on the farm as if it had been earned from drugs. We were told we needed to move out of the house so it could be sold. We were given 4 weeks or so to vacate the place. It didn't take that long, for we had already moved much back to our house by then. When we had learned through the grapevine what was happening to the couple. Jim at the little store kept us up to date as to what to expect as the law took its course. After we learned that the couple had been arrested, we told my family. My father came down and said he was going to take the equipment he wanted that worked on his tractor, so he did. Before the 2 weeks were over, the FBI came over and a second time to our house and asked about the equipment that was missing, and I sent them to my father. It was confiscated, and Dad didn't get into any trouble with the feds. I don't know what he said to them, but I was glad it was over. I was surprised that such a nice couple would get into so much trouble. I never heard any more from them, and I don't know what became of them. I do know that the feds confiscated everything that they had at that house there in Nycup. Stephanie and I uh, were glad to get back to our house. As they said, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. We knew that life was about to get a whole lot harder when we got back into our house. Mom set up a barn raising party where all of our friends and family came to help dry in the whole house. It was a very proud day for us when they all showed up and they put our house together and finished the walls and the roof, and the house was enclosed that one day. When we moved into the place to live, it was more comfortable for everyone. It had 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. Now comes the time when we had to get serious about living off grid. It may sound simple, but it gets complicated very quickly. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. The next chapter is going to talk about living off grid. I thought that was a remarkable event that the whole family came and uh, and all of our friends and put my house together. I wasn't fully healed by that time, but I did what I could, and I was glad for all the help we had. God works in mysterious ways for those who love Him. Think about that. If you enjoy these stories, like the story on YouTube and share it with your friends you think might enjoy it as well. If you get in a hurry and want to hear or read more quicker, you can go to my webpage, which is curtis-jones-books.squarespace.com, or you can also go to my YouTube page or my Facebook page, which is Curtis Jones Author page on Facebook. Both of these sites have links that'll take you to Amazon, where all my books are located. They can come in ebook or paperback. Some of them come in hardback if you prefer to give them as a gift. And I also have links that take you to the Montgomery Public Library, where they have on file a seminar that I was just starting to present when COVID struck, but I got to go up and do it for them, and they recorded it, and it's at their site. If you enjoy these things, subscribe and hit the bell, and you will be notified each time I present a story. God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.